Hi everyone and welcome. I'm glad that everyone is here today. For all of those of you who are on summer break, thanks for actually making it. And for everyone else, just glad to have you too. Today we're going to talk about where to start. We're going to examine the language organization of different communication devices, why the language is on there, and then actually talk about some strategies to support and increase the use of communication devices. My name is Megan Mussano. I am a speech-language pathologist by training. I've also taken additional AT courses and certificates and now have my ATP certificate. I am a full-time assistive technology coordinator for West Aurora School District, which is a large public school district, K-12, in the western suburbs of Chicago. That is my full-time position as the AT team. And I also teach assistive technology courses for the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. So that is my background. At any point in time, feel free to throw in some questions. There's a few of us, but we'll make this as interactive as possible. Just for starters, let me know who I'm working with here. Let me know who you guys are. If you could go ahead and take a second to fill out this little poll survey, let me know what position you service. All right. I'm very curious about those others now, but we'll go ahead and go with that. So I'm happy to have a lot of speech-language pathologists here. Like I said, that is my training, so I will definitely use some speechy terms, as we could say. And for everyone else, I promise it'll be good for you too. So, learning outcomes. Today, I really just, as I kind of said during the title slide, want to look at different symbol representations and core vocabulary sets. This is the way we're going to kind of analyze the communication symbols that are already present on some communication devices and some of the symbols that you are going to want to add to your own communication devices, kind of like that low and mid-tech devices. We'll also kind of talk about how you would design your own. And I want you guys to obtain some strategies to teach and implement both those low and high-tech communication devices, and really to support functional communication. So let's just start. When I'm in an interactive room, I say, what's on your device? This is just an example of a 32-cell communication device. You could see these. GoTalk has a device this size, or TextSpeak has a device this size. This is just an example of what you'd run into. The reason I put this on is because often the vocabulary I see on a lot of my students' communication devices when I walk into a room is something like this. Yes, no, mom, dad, sister, you got the days of the week on there. The reason I put this up there is this truly functional for these students to communicate? Truly the answer is no, because can you ask for help using these communication symbols? Can you talk about what you like? Can you ask a question? This vocabulary is often vocabulary I see in the school district that teachers may put onto the communication devices, but it's not really functional for communication throughout the individual's environment. I like to talk about Tuesday. You see, we have Tuesday right there. How functional is the word Tuesday? How many times a week do you actually get to say the word Tuesday? At most 3. You get to say today's Tuesday, or tomorrow's Tuesday, or yesterday was Tuesday. We just used one of our precious 32 cells on this communication device for the word Tuesday, where it could actually be much more functional for the individual to request things like my turn, and then they can make a choice between the days of the week using communication symbols. So what we really want in our communication systems, whether it be low or high tech, is the ability to have a variety of communicative functions with language. We want our students and individuals to be able to initiate communication, to terminate activities, to comment, request, to be able to reject, ask questions, provide information, interject. And one of my favorites is direct the actions of others. A lot of times individuals who have limited verbal skills or are nonverbal don't often get to tell other people what to do. And boy, do they ever love to do that when they have the opportunity. I really want everybody to be able to express their feelings too. So this is not a comprehensive list of everything we want our individuals to communicate, but this is a good focus to start. So with these ideas in mind, let's pop to the next slide. Which would you rather use to communicate? The one that has the days of the week or the color-coded one on the bottom? I'm hoping in your head everyone is saying the color-coded one on the bottom. You can see in this, color coding is using a Fitzgerald key, which I will talk about later in the slides. But these communication symbols present let you have functional communication throughout environments. It is focused on that core vocabulary. But I also want to note, we added in a few communication cells such as, what do you think? Now this is a pre-programmed phrase, which I'm going to talk about a little bit of why it's good to have those related to research. But I know when I put this in front of a student, they're not necessarily asking my opinion. They don't want to necessarily know what I think when they hit it. But I do know for a fact, every time one of my students hits this button, the what do you think, one of the adults in the classroom communicates with them and has a conversation and provides that social interaction. So even though this is like that higher order level thinking of a student actually asking someone else's opinion, even if they're not at that point, I can tell you every time a student hits that, they get a social interaction. And that on its own is a positive. So what's the foundation? And I hope many of you have heard of this, especially all the speech therapists we have present. I'm sure this is review for you, so just humor me for a second. The foundation is really core vocabulary and fringe vocabulary. Core vocabulary are the words that say almost everything. About 80% of what we said can be said with core words. Fringe vocabulary are often nouns. These are the types of words that aren't used as frequently, but still important to some students. If you want to know more about core language, here's what I just said. We communicate over 80% of what we say using core language. A set of 300 words can be combined to produce basically all the topics we want to talk about. That website attached there, thepracticalaac.org, has some good information on core vocabulary. And truly the queen of core vocabulary is Gail Van Tatenhove. She has that link, provides you with a lot of information and a lot of resources related to core vocabulary. I'll go into some of her core vocabulary in a bit. So here's more, I'm delving into core vocabulary for a bit, using the example of summer as an example of selecting core words versus fringe words. So a fringe word, for example, would be vacation or lemonade, sunburn, or beach. These are words that are relevant to a specific topic, but they're not necessarily words you would use frequently. You're not going to talk a lot lemonade throughout your day, every day, and in all of your environments. But as you can see on the right-hand side, here are some core words that can be used to communicate or get your idea across. This is just an example. If I said hot, red, on me, hurt, hopefully you'd be able to understand that the word sunburn would be coming out of that. Or if I said go far, break, new, different place, hopefully we could get vacation out of that if we know what we're talking about. The point I put right below it is when we provide information through core vocabulary, we're teaching them, our students, about the vocabulary, about vacation or about lemonade or sunburn. But when our students are able to express the concept of sunburn back to us by saying hot, red, on me, hurt, not only do we know that they're understanding the sunburn, but we're really getting that comprehension. We're really teaching, we know that we have truly taught them the word because they're able to use their vocabulary to then explain it back to us. Okay, so here is Gail Van Tatenhove. Her studies have done great, given us lots of information about core vocabulary. The example I have here on the right side of the screen, this whole communication layout, is actually from the Pixon project. The Pixon project, you can see on the left-hand side here, is a kit about early language development. Sorry, I saw I had a hand raised. The Pixon project uses these core vocabulary words, and it uses actually the MinSpeak icons similar to the PRC communication devices. But if you're looking for a good paper version of core vocabulary to create some core vocabulary boards, this would be a really good place to start with the Pixon project. There's a lot of research behind it, which is very nice. Here's an example of some of the core vocabulary words. For example, we were talking about sunburn, and that's where I got these words. So how would we say sunburn? And that's where we say hot and hurt, on me. You know, these are, with these words here, our students are able to express a lot. I don't want to kill you guys with core vocabulary, but give me just another minute and we'll get into the rest. Here are top words used by toddlers, and as you can see, this entire list is also of core vocabulary. I put this on just because there's another study. These are a lot of words I like to start with on my communication devices, no matter what age or grade or level the student is, just because these are very powerful. You get a lot of communication, a lot of controlling the environment, a lot of commenting, a lot of requesting based upon just these 22 words. So it is a good place to start. So I know I've been pounding core vocabulary into you guys. The next thing I want to say really quick is phrases are important too. And I know I mentioned that during when we were talking about the initial color-coded layout that I had made. There is research to support using phrases is also a good way to use communication devices. I like to use both fields of research. I like to have a lot of core vocabulary. I like to have some fringe vocabulary that's very powerful for that individual. But I also like to provide some pre-programmed phrases. Phrases are good because it does reduce the amount of time and energy needed for a device user to produce a given message. They can press one button or one cell instead of 15 to communicate a complex communication purpose. However, you still don't want to fill up the entire communication device with phrases because you want to provide opportunities for that novel language production. Below is a list of some common phrases that are used into a communication device. Again, you do not by any means have to go with this list. It's just kind of the idea that research shows that core vocabulary is good, that some fringe vocabulary is good, but also that using phrases can be very beneficial too. So here's a little summation. So we do want to consider fringe vocabulary and specific needs when you're choosing your vocabulary. For example, I know I love core. I know I'm focused on that right now. But for example, if you had specific areas of need, for that student, it is definitely okay to throw in some fringe vocabulary. For example, if you're working really hard on potty training, if that is one of the student's goals, if that is a classroom goal, if that's what the parents are working on at home, I would absolutely put the word bathroom or the phrase, I need to go to the bathroom, as one button on the communication device so that it's easier for them to access and they have a quick way to communicate that. If you have a student who's very socially motivated, I would put a very easy way for them to initiate or terminate communication onto their communication device. A quick one-hit button able to do that. Social interaction is very motivating for many of our students, and sometimes we do have to take into account if they have a reward system or something they're working for. If that is their behavior plan and if they need to say, I am working for, and have choices, that might be something that you want to have very easily accessible on their communication device. We still want that core vocabulary, but absolutely take into account the individual's specific needs and provide some of that fringe. I also want to run through the next few slides are going to be about Janice Light's communicative competencies. It's another way to examine the language that we're providing on communication devices. So Janice Light has 4 communicative competencies, one of which is social. So this is, we want to make sure that we are providing language so that our students and individuals can be social. We want to provide those discourse strategies, the interjections, the adjustments to context. We want them to be able to have the language to maintain a topic or transition between topics. On the right hand of the screen, I have some examples about some pre-programmed phrases or some visual scenes, including any of this language would be very good. I often find students like the look at this. Look at this. That's a very quick phrase that can be a very good attention getter, and it's a positive way for our students to gain attention of adults and others around them. Instead of using aggression or physical touch to gain attention, they can hit the communication button that says, look at this, and gain attention in a positive way. Let me get on a soapbox real quick. Don't worry, we'll have plenty of time to go through the slides. But I wanted to say that when we are implementing a communication system, and for example, if we provide them the vocabulary of look at this, we want to make sure that as adults, as every single person interacting with the student, when they press the button look at this, we have to provide a lot of positive reinforcement and provide them more attention for that positive communication as compared to the attention they would get for a negative behavior. We have to make sure that the communication device is the most powerful way for the student to gain what they want. As a speech therapist, I'm going to say 90% of behavior is due to lack of communication. So just think of all the ways that you have students who try to get your attention, and all the bad ways they try to get attention. Like I said, we often have students who are slightly physically aggressive, or will get into the personal space of someone else, or just physically tap on the adult. You ever have those that tapping on your arm, teacher, 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 teacher. Obviously they might not be saying teacher, but for those students, reinforcing the power of the communication device above the bad behaviors is what really supports their improved behavior, but also supports the power of the communication device. So using those types of phrases such as look at this, or I need help, or come here. These are actually 3 of my favorite. Come here, I need help, and look at this. Those are communication phrases I like to have on a lot of my communication devices. Also, on communication devices, I really like to teach a student to say, I like that, and I don't like that. These are very powerful comments that our students can have. We've done it by tasting apple juice and lemon juice. You know, say, I like, I don't like. It's very age appropriate to let our students be able to say, I don't like this. You know, and often that gets forgotten when we're creating communication devices. We often, with our students, we are directing their day, and we are telling them, here's what you do, here's 1 through 100 things that you accomplish, here's your schedule, here's your structured tasks. We're often directing them, which is great. That's the education field. That's how a lot of our students are successful. I understand that. But at the same time, we still want to give them opportunities to say, I don't like it. And we want them to be able to say, I don't like it, instead of throwing it. We want them to be able to say, I don't like it, instead of tearing it up. Or again, we want to use this positive way of communicating I don't like versus the maladaptive behavior of aggression or throwing or something else. So this list of phrases are some really good pre-programmed phrases to be aware of and possibly add into your communication device. Operational. This is something that I, as a speech pathologist and AT coordinator, sometimes forget, to be honest with you. It's I'm often so focused on teaching the vocabulary and the meaning of each of the symbols that sometimes I forget to teach them to turn it on and off, or teach a student to change the volume control. Teaching individuals how to use the device is also a good way to go about implementing a communication device. Volume control especially, it can be very fun for a student to pretend to whisper to their friends or to pretend to yell something across the room at their friends. So that volume control can be a very motivating button on a communication device. On some of the more high-tech communication devices, it is built into the screen, and I'll show that to you later. And some of the more mid-tech or low-tech communication devices, it is on the actual device itself. For example, on a GoTalk, on the green GoTalks, it is a button on the front of the device, which, just so you know, those buttons can be locked out if you read all the directions on the back. If a student is a little over-enthusiastic with the volume buttons, that can be turned off. Or for an AMDI, like a text speak that we were looking at, the volume control is on the back of the device. So I just wanted to mention, don't forget to go ahead and teach that part of the device. So strategic, we're on to the next level of Janus Light. These are strategies that you want to teach to your student when they're struggling to communicate. The example that I provided with that text speak or the GoTalk or the 32 cell, which is very similar to one of the quick talkers from AbleNet, I'm just generally saying any of those mid-tech communication devices that have the paper overlays, you often don't have enough vocabulary to say what you want to say. You're limited to 25 or 32 words or even 9 words. And even on some of the high-tech communication devices, for example, I know a high-tech PRC accent device has 7,000 words. The LAMP app has about 3,500 words, and Touch Chat or the Nova Chat is somewhere around there too. 3,500 words or even 7,000 words is not enough to communicate everything you want to communicate. It's not enough to say everything that we as adults want to communicate. So that is where we do strategic planning. That's where we learn to talk around the word circumlocution, or use some of that core vocabulary to describe a fringe word you don't have access to. But we can also provide that by putting a button of saying, not on this board. That's kind of the out. That is one pre-programmed button, one phrase that would let your student say, I want to say something, but it's not on this board. I don't have access to the word that I want to have. And that's when you can then play 20 questions, 21 questions to figure out what word they actually want. But having a pre-programmed phrase called not on this board, or I need a new word, or I want to make a change, this is also a good use of a button on your communication device. Linguistic. Here's our last Janus-like communicative competency. This one I want to go into a bit because this is one of the goals I wanted you guys as participants to see today, is understanding the linguistic representation, or the visual representation of the language. So understanding the linguistic competency. So what we have here, this is about knowing the language and the code, being able to receptively identify the pictures, but also expressively use those pictures or symbols to produce what you want. I'm going to talk about iconicity. Iconicity is how closely that symbol represents the word that you want it to actually communicate. So again, when this is happening in person, I cheat. We go one picture at a time. The picture on the left, I put it up and I say, hey class, what do you think this is? Now we as adults have some background knowledge already that we know 500, the symbol to the left of that, the symbol to the left, that's a money sign, so we know that's $500. We know that this gavel has something to do with a judge, so it's a rule and it's a law. We know that this circle with the line through it means no. And we all have seen cans in our life so that we know this is a can. I would then ask the transparency. So if I just showed you this picture and I say, guess what this picture is? You know, you're probably going to say something about like there's a fine for littering or a fine for trash. Then you look at what's called the translucency. Translucency is how closely does that word relate to the visual picture shown. And that's a rating that can be done. This transparency and translucency is how iconicity is measured in the research, so I just kind of wanted to throw it out there for fun. Now the next picture, we have this and this. Yeah, so if you're not familiar with these, you could think that these are a bunch of mountains maybe. Maybe they're mountains. And this is either like a tree floating up in the air, or maybe it's an arrow pointing forward. So a lot of times, educated individuals who have been driving a car for 30 years are going to say maybe there's mountains ahead. This is actually a road sign from Canada. So I don't know if any of you are from Canada or for somewhere other than the U.S. I was trying to get some unique signs to prove my point. But this is actually a rough road ahead, like if they were doing construction on a road and it was a rough groove surface. That's what this is saying. There's a bump ahead or a rough groove surface. The reason I put this whole thing up, I know that this was not a futile exercise in looking at road signs. The idea is signs make more sense to you, symbols make more sense to you when you have the background knowledge to understand every part of the symbol. But if you are exposed to a completely new symbol that you're unaware of and you don't have the background knowledge for that, it's hard to understand the symbol, even if you're an educated individual. So that's what some symbols, just because they make sense to us, it doesn't mean it's necessarily going to make sense to our students. And that's something I really wanted to focus on with you guys, is the research on symbol sets. The reason I'm doing this is every communication device has a different symbol set. Some use board maker, some use symbol sticks, some even use digital pictures. There's a whole variety of different ways to put symbols onto a communication device. I do want to note, though, that some symbols are more iconic than another. For example, these symbols are a lot easier to understand than bliss symbolics. Bliss symbolics is a whole other story. It's an old symbol set out there where you could actually combine symbols to create new words. It gave you a lot of flexibility, but it's not something we really use in schools today. But here, right here, this is a key. I'm putting lots of arrows around it to point it out. I could draw a little star on here. Many studies show, put a star on that one because it's important, that understanding the picture, things that are iconic to adults are not necessarily iconic to children. And like I said, that's because of the background knowledge that we have for the symbol. So just because the symbol makes sense to us, it doesn't necessarily make sense to our student. And we can see that the research here is saying research is, or the iconicity or understanding symbols is age-bound, and that's often due to the background knowledge. So again, I should put a really big star on this one. The implications of all the research is showing that communication symbols have to be taught. And that's really what I'm getting at right now. You could choose any single symbol set you want. You could work with the MinSpeak icons. You could work with emojis. You could work with symbol sticks. It doesn't matter truly, deep down inside, it doesn't really matter which symbol set you choose as long as you teach that symbol set and as long as you're consistent and support the device using that symbol set. So they have to be directly taught, they have to be practiced in isolation and sequence. Now, I do want to note there are some individuals who, no matter how much you try to teach them a specific symbol means a specific word, sometimes they aren't processing it very well. That's where you can look at a symbol hierarchy, and you can go ahead and look into that if you want, using black and white line drawings, colored line drawings. And then I want to say there are digital pictures. That is much more iconic. It is easier to understand digital pictures. But there are some students who are successful with objects, but not with digital pictures. And I'm so sorry I didn't make a slide for this, so I want to throw it out there really quick. COPS or Toby, not like Toby Dynavox, but COPS stands for cut out picture symbols. This is where you actually take a digital picture and cut out the background of the digital picture so that you have a digital picture but with the outline, with no background. That is more, it has higher iconicity. It's easier for our individuals, our students to understand than a digital picture with a background. Another way to describe that is TOBI, T-O-B-I, True Object Based Icon, TOBI, different than Toby Dynavox. So a true object-based icon is, again, you take a digital picture of the item, but you actually print it up on a piece of paper to make it almost life-size, or basically life-size. That true object-based icon, you cut out the background, go ahead and laminate it, and that can be your symbol. This has actually been a really successful strategy for me. I've had a student, a couple, at a private placement I was working with who were not, their speech therapist was saying they were struggling on picking up PECs. They're not getting PECs. But then at the same time they said, but he'll come and grab my hand and drag it over to what he wants. I was like, okay, so he's understanding initiation. He's understanding traveling even. He comes over to travel to get you, to bring you to the item. I was like, the problem is probably not PECs because he's understanding that initiation. The problem is probably his understanding of the symbols. The symbols weren't taught and paired correctly. So I had them go back. But then we also changed from the small board maker colored PCS, the line drawing symbols, into those COPS or the TOBI symbols, the true object-based icon or the cutout picture symbols. And he was much, much more successful understanding those symbols than others. So I know it seems like I was just kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth right there, where I'm telling you that our students can learn any symbol as long as it's taught and practiced in isolation and in sequence. But I also do want you to be aware that sometimes there are a few students who are going to benefit from changing symbols or making the symbols more transparent or easier to understand. And a way to do that is using the cutout picture symbols or the true object-based icons. Okay, so what did all of that half an hour of me talking about core vocabulary and fringe vocabulary and Janice Light tell you? It's going to tell you this. Vocabulary selection is the foundation to good communication. I'm going to tell you, start with core words. That is a good foundation to have a lot of core words. I'm going to say use some powerful fringe vocabulary. For example, in this communication device, we have a word that is break time, something different. These are kind of fringe vocabulary, but this student needed to request frequent breaks, so having one picture to say that was very helpful. I'm also going to say to have some of those pre-programmed messages, such as, what do you think? Once again, that is there to increase socialization, not necessarily ask for somebody's opinion. And then down here I have not on this board. That's one of those strategic Janice Light operations or Janice Light competencies, so that you can say, I have a word I want to say, but it's not on this board. So you can kind of see I have my fringe vocabulary, I have some of those pre-programmed phrases, I'm looking at all of Janice Light's communicative competencies, I'm making sure that the symbols, they're understanding linguistic portion of the symbols, that they have the operational, that they can turn the volume up and down, that they have the strategic, such as not on this board. So if you really think about all those things together, you can create a really strong language to start communication for your students. So a little bit of that front loading, a little bit of time spent thinking about what words are on the device are really going to help your students be very successful. I also want to say that silly is a really fun phrase to put on a communication device, especially if you record it with a fun voice saying, that's silly. It's a motivating way for students to comment and be involved in an age-appropriate way. And again, the excuse me or I need help, those are good phrases that can gain attention in a positive manner instead of in an aggressive or inappropriate. But we still have our core vocabulary of, again, go, stop, don't, I want, my turn, and the ability to ask questions such as where, what, and who. And you can also still say things such, when it's time to make a choice, this board can be out for every communicative function, because you can say, I want that one. And your student can point to what they want, or they can then make a choice off of a paper board or another type of communication board or a menu. But by being able to say, I want that one, they're initiating communication in an appropriate manner and then can make a choice later using pictures or using symbols. Okay, so now we're hopping into the, okay, what does this look like on my communication device? And maybe I don't have 32 cells. So now we're just going to go through some examples of what can be put on various communication devices. What I have here, this is a quick talker. It's a single message from AbleNet. Here's an example of a single message from GoTalk, I believe, and then many of you have probably seen this. This is a big Mac from, I think we also get those at AbleNet. So yes, a Big Mac. These are examples of single message speech generating devices. Here's a list, not at all a comprehensive list, just kind of wanted to get some ideas out there of what can we put on a single message device to increase communication throughout the day. We don't want to just go for 1 or 2 hits throughout the day. I know when you go through an official PECS training, PECS will tell you, you want 150 communicative in purposes, 150 exchanges a day. So I'm going to go ahead and steal their research and say, I want our students to hit their single message SGD 150 times a day. I would constantly, if you have a student that this is their communicative level, that this is what they're successful with, maybe they're on a head switch, just hitting one device at a time, even just saying, hey, what's up, or what's next, or good morning. You know, there's so many things that you can say using this. We actually, in one of my schools, I have a school that is more of a severe and profound in a life skills population and autism. It's a public school, but it acts a little more like a private school because there's almost 200 kids who fall within those classes, within that range. And we have quite a few classrooms where our students, due to physical disabilities and cognitive impairment, use a lot of these single message devices. We actually place Velcro on the back of these devices, and we Velcro like a Big Mac or to their wheelchair, and then we have a switch coming out head mounted so that they can select that. And this Big Mac then stays attached to their chair throughout the entire day. And it's a matter of training individuals, the teachers, the assistants, or the parapros, whatever that name is in your school district, to reprogram it on the fly as needed with some of these other phrases. Because just saying good morning is not enough. We then have to move into phrases like, hey, what's up? Or what's next? Or my turn. You know, these are things that we want our individuals to communicate throughout the day, not just once to say good morning and it's sunny outside. So what does life look like on a series of messages? So the next step we have here is step-by-step. AbleNet also has a quick talker sequence, which functions the same way. It's the exact same idea as their single message. It's just a sequence. This is what do we do when we have a series of messages on a device. I really like this because it teaches the skill of reciprocity. It really allows the student to hit the button and say one thing, wait for the individual to comment back, and then they hit the button to say the next thing. So how do we do this? We can tell knock-knock jokes, tell stories. In reading a book, you can program each page onto the communication device, so as you flip the pages, they can read it. Singing songs, delivering morning announcements. I like it a lot in math, too, for counting one-to-one correspondence. So on this sequence communication SGD, every time you hit the button, it would say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So an adult can be pointing and the student can be hitting their communication device working on that one-to-one correspondence. It also gives you a variety of ways to say yes. Like if you are working with partner-assisted scanning, you can use one of these to say, yes, that's the one I want, or yeah, write that down. It just kind of brings a little variety into the way to say a positive yes. Another thing I really like to do is I like to use partner-assisted scanning to go through the alphabet to give our students some exposure to letters. So, for example, I would scan through, do you want the letter A, B, C, D? And then click D and say, yeah, that's the one I want. And I'd write down the letter D. We could then start to formulate some words for the letter D. We write those down in a book. And then we've even done poetry. We've done poetry that way, where we would say, okay, everybody, we're talking about summer. And we scan through the alphabet. And if they come up with the letter B, oh, beach or beach ball, so then we would say summer is the beach. And that would be our poetry. We'd write that down on a page. Everybody in the class would have a page. We turn it into a book, and then the whole book could be placed onto the step-by-step or that series message device, and our students can then go to each other and read the poetry that they just wrote as a class. This is a way that just a single step-by-step or a single Big Mac or a single Quick Talker will give our students access to the curriculum. You are then giving them access to poetry and to literacy in a way that they've never had access before. So even with just a small device like this, you can accomplish a lot. There are also some two-message devices out there. Here's some examples of things that could be placed onto those. I don't need to read it to you guys. You get the gist. It's here for ideas for you. And again, this is not a comprehensive list. Here's some ideas for 4 to 8 cell devices. I would say use some core vocabulary, but also make sure that if you only have 4 to 8 cells, put on words that our students can't communicate in any other way. If they have a way to say yes and no, then don't waste one of your cells with the word yes and with the word no, because then you're down to 6. So be strategic in those words that you choose. Here's an example. These are examples using BoardMaker. This is a layout for a Go Talk, but this is also exactly like the layout for the AbleNet Quick Talkers. And if you're using one of the AbleNet Quick Talkers, those white devices, they have a symbol overlay maker that's on their website, and you can actually use your own pictures and clip art for free, so you don't necessarily have to have BoardMaker. So you're able to make overlays for these communication devices on your own using Google Images, for example. So here's an example of, the I want, my turn, we have more, all done, I need help. For this student, the look at this was one of those pre-programmed messages that gained attention, that was really important with them. And this is one of my favorite words, so I'm putting 3 arrows right here. Something different. I had a student who would love to play the computer, but he'd have behaviors. And when he only had when he was only able to say more or all done, he wasn't able to communicate what he wanted. For example, he would be at the computer playing a game, and he wanted a different game. So he would say all done, but then, because he was all done with that game. But then the staff would then say, okay, computer's all done, and then he'd say no, he wanted more, and he would have behaviors. When he was only able to say more and all done, he wasn't able to communicate everything. As soon as we taught him the word something different, again, I'm putting 3 arrows on because I love it. As soon as we were able to teach something different, it took a while to teach, but it ended up being the most powerful word for him. We would use it at snack too. Do you want more snack? Are you all done? No, you want to try something different. So providing that third option really opens up communication for the student, more than just more and all done. Here on the right, you can see that that's just more options. So it's bringing in a few more language words, such as like and don't like. I do think it's very powerful to give our students the ability to comment. And up here again, I wrote, if a student can indicate yes and no, then don't waste the space on the cell putting the yes and no. Only put things on there that they can't communicate in another way. So here's examples of some 32 cell communication devices. Again, I would start with core vocabulary, but here you can put in some academics. With the numbers put in this, you can count all the way up to 199 just by combining numbers. So it does give up a lot of variety, or it frees up a lot of variety for teaching and education. I personally would like it if they could have access to their core vocabulary at the same time that they're working on letters or numbers. So sometimes having a second communication device is good. And I'm also going to say if a student is functioning at this level where they can handle multiple overlays, they can handle multiple boards, I'm going to say time to switch to a dynamic display communication device. These are organized, these are the devices that you guys know, and we'll talk about those. The last 15 minutes of this session we'll talk about devices and teaching them. But they're organized sometimes in individual scenes, sometimes there's quick hits or social buttons, but there's still those common phrases such as my turn, excuse me, or I need help. So still teaching those same functional core words, but on the communication device. I really like to start with those 32 phrases no matter what device I'm on. Something I wanted to mention really quick is don't forget to color code your communication device. The one that I used as my example most of the time, I color coded in Fitzgerald Key. Goossens, Crane, and Eldor also has a good color coding. Dynavox, Pixon, TouchChat, they all use color coding. Whatever you guys choose, it doesn't matter. Just be sure you're consistent with the color coding. Research shows that it helps the students, and some research is kind of tricky on that, but I am going to tell you for a fact, research shows even if it's not helping the students identify the words, it is helping the adults identify the words, which helps with modeling and helps us find words faster. So color coding based upon parts of speech is helpful. So we talked all about what to put on a device and why, so now it's time to teach it. Don't worry, this is quick, we'll go through really well. So strategies to teach the device. Number one is model, model, model. I put it 3 times because it is the most important thing you can do to help teach and allow one of our students to understand their communication device. We also have to make sure that we react and respond. We want to consistently respond to any of their communication attempts. It really links that cause-effect nature of the communication device and makes it powerful. We want to make sure we create opportunities for communication. I'll get into that in a second. We want to make it functional. And the last thing is you as the adults have to know the student's device. You have to make sure that you use their language and know their words. And like I said, I will get into that. So let's go through. Model, model, model. The fancy word for this in the research is aided language stimulation. I cannot tell you how important this is. Back in the day, people used to say, that's the student's device, don't use their device. Yes, it is their voice, and it is their voice to use. However, they need to learn the symbols. They need to learn the motor programming to create those symbols. They need to have models to understand what language can be produced on their device. So model, model, model. We have to communicate to our students in the same quote-unquote language that they use. So we need to talk to them in pictures so they can talk back to us in pictures. We need to use their device to expand upon utterances. I'm going to say there's no such thing as too much modeling. Now, obviously, use your clinical judgment. I know sometimes that some individuals with autism can often become frustrated if you're constantly taking their device or if you're in their space. So use your clinical judgment, but make sure you model. Repetition from us and from them. The more repetition, the better. The reason I say that, even LAMP, which stands for Language Acquisition Through Motor Planning, the whole basis of that communication app is that you learn through repetition through that motor planning. So as I said, aided language stimulation. It's great. If you want to learn more, there's a link, AAC Action Points, Aided Language Stimulation. That's a good website to go to. We want to talk verbally as we model and combine cells on their communication device. I can't stress how important it is to touch the individual's communication device. So why do we do this? Because a typical developing child will hear over 1,000 words an hour. I mean, that's up to 6 million words a year. And I'm going to the next slide real quick to say how many times does one of our students who uses a communication device, they're hearing things auditorily, but how many times do they get language modeled in their language? How many times do they see symbols being used to communicate? Oftentimes it's not a lot. It's zero. Here's an example, another visual of how important this is. When spoken language is going in as the model, the language input, the output is spoken language. That is normal, typical language development. You hear language, you understand it over time, you produce it. What's happening with our students is they're hearing spoken language, but then we're expecting them to produce language using symbols. It's a whole other language. I mean, you would say it's all Greek to me. We're putting one language in and expecting another language out. And that's really, this is the area of the spoken language, the language input for our students right here. That's the real issue. We need to communicate to our students in the same language we want them to produce. So we need to communicate to them in symbols so that they can then produce symbols. So I hope I drilled that in enough. Model, model, model. Touch their device more. React and respond is really where we have to acknowledge their communication. If they tell you to stop, then stop. We have to reinforce that the communication device is powerful, that the communication they're providing, once again, we want that to be more powerful than the maladaptive behaviors. So we want to respond to every communication attempt. You don't necessarily have to listen every time. Maybe the student's telling you stop and you have to say, I know you want to stop, let's just do 2 more. I mean, you can still negotiate and still be the teacher, or I know you want to stop, I know you want to take a break, 2 more, first work, then break. You still want to acknowledge that they're producing communication. So respond and keep responding. More on react and respond. When you're first teaching a device like that cause and effect, you do want to immediately grant that request, even if it's not desired object or action, because you're really linking that cause and effect, that this device, that I'm not just sitting here with an iPad in front of me and playing with it, I'm actually using this iPad or using this communication device to communicate to another person. So whenever they press a button, we want to respond. That is the second most important thing. We want to model, 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 good language, but we want to make sure we react and respond to every time they hit the button. That reinforces and truly puts in that that device is being used for communication. Here's a few speech therapists. I hope you know this, but we're throwing it in for everyone else too. Some opportunities to use language, like for example, creating a barrier. These are examples of sabotage in the speech world, but put in a barrier like a gentle obstruction, block the way so that they have to tell you to move or tell you to go or ask for help. Put the, during occupational therapy, I did co-treatment with a therapist, and we would put every single lid on so tight that the kids had to ask for help to get it open. Or we would hand out materials to every student except one so that they would say, hey, where's mine? We are creating opportunities for them to communicate, forcing communication almost. We want to create opportunities for them to ask questions, to make choices. And I also like to be surprising and novel, like being dynamic increases their engagement. And I had one student who loved to tell me that that's silly that I was being ridiculous. And he's right, I was. So it was very appropriate. We do want to make it functional and motivating. I know this goes back to the choice of words being produced, or the choice of words that you put on your device, but we definitely want to focus on functional first before we focus on academics. Like we have to get that link that the communication device is actually used for communication across environments, across different communication partners, not just for saying today is Tuesday, tomorrow is Wednesday. Actually, today is Thursday and tomorrow is Friday. Woo! But that's just kind of something I wanted to say. Start with functional. This last note I have, if the learner becomes frustrated and if they're struggling to communicate, go back to modeling. Go ahead and model the correct correct that error and help them get what they actually want so that they can see success, so model success. So after you've taught that functional communication, I am going to say I understand sometimes it's not a choice. After the learner is fluent in the speech device, it's okay to say this is not a choice, we're moving on. Know the device. This is a big thing. In order for you to model and be successful, you have to know the communication device of your students. I just put a quick list right here, like the LAMP app is like the accent device from PRC, the Touch Chat app is like the NovaChat device from Saltillo, Compass app is on Tobii Dynavox, Snap and Core First is Tobii Dynavox. It can be on the Indy or the I-110. I have a student using a Pod book, and I have another one using Pod on a Tobii Dynavox device. I do have students using Proloquo Go on an app. And I have another student, we're looking at the Quick Talker Freestyle. That is from AbleNet. That is, like Proloquo Go, for example, is just on the iPad. It doesn't have a dedicated device that goes with it. But the Quick Talker Freestyle is a dedicated communication device from AbleNet that any app can be loaded on. So that's a fundable way to get basically any app you want, any communication app. On the bottom, I put a link for Jane Farrell's communication. This is like every single app communication app there is. So if you're looking for options, that's a good place to go. So really quickly, since there's not a lot of time left, I'm sorry, what devices have you guys used? What are you working with? Go ahead and click on this if you're still around. So got some Proloquos, some LAMP apps. There we go. Okay. Yeah, there is a lot of variety in here. Okay. All right, I'm going to skip ahead real quick just so everybody can see this. We're working with a lot. So Proloquo Go, obviously very popular. As I mentioned, if you want to get that through funding on a dedicated device, using the AbleNet Quick Talker Freestyle is kind of the way to go. I do have a lot of students using the PRC accent devices or the LAMP app. PRC is going to tell you it's great for everyone. I often find that students moderate to severe autism do phenomenal using accent devices in the LAMP app. It's just the structure and consistency in that app is fabulous. And then I have a lot of students using the Touch Chat app or the NovaChat communication device who are often very socially motivated. So good to see a lot of variety there. And you know what? That is really the key. You have to feature match these devices to each student's needs. So really working on that. Choosing a device based upon the student's needs, not necessarily what is happening in the classroom or what you guys like. Really quickly, I put on there, I was going to go through some of the communication devices to show you examples, but we don't have a lot of time. But these are some of the most frequent ones that we've been used. I do want to show you really quick. I'm going to share my whole desktop to show you. Right now, this is the Touch Chat editor. This is a free download from Saltillo. This is the editing software for the communication device. But this lets you put the software onto your computer. I then can put this up onto the screen in models such as I want. I'm going to say something different. Because that is one of my favorite things to teach. I want something different. This is an example of the 60 basic layout on the Saltillo NovaChat or on the Touch Chat. But being able to project this up on the screen to use as modeling is phenomenal for my students. New Voice, this is an example of the Accent PRC device. You can get the LAMP app on here, or you can get any level of the PRC device. This is a fabulous example. Again, this is software you can download onto your computer, which lets you model on your personal computer why students have the communication device in front of them. One thing I want to mention about PRC devices that I do really like is, is turning on Vocabulary Builder. I really appreciate that you can hide away so many different symbols and just focus on some of that core vocabulary like I want. So they start to learn the motor programming before you move up to more and more symbols. The last thing I wanted to mention is Snap and Core First from Tobii Dynavox. It's a great app, and it's also a dedicated device. I like the core vocabulary on here. And the one thing I do like, you can see here on the right, are topics. They have topic-specific vocabulary where it's kind of like no-fail communication. If that's what your student needs, it's a good option. Different devices for different reasons. Here's examples. I just talked through LAMP and Touch Chat and Snap and Core First. I put those up there. I showed you. Don't forget to teach some of the initial functions of language. And the last thing I kind of wanted to show is all research shows that when you provide communication devices to individuals, that their verbal speech either stays the same or more. Speech generating devices actually, here's another one, increase either communication stays the same or they end up talking more. I always have to tell parents that. I never want them to worry that using a communication device is going to reduce their verbal output. It often increases. Here's my last fun thing, AAC Bootcamp Do's and Don'ts of Communication Devices. Just go ahead and Google this, and you'll see a million examples of this. It's just a great little visual to provide for your teachers. Last thing I have are some of my references I use. Feel free to contact me. I'm happy to help. I'd love to spread the word of teaching communication devices because I think they're a phenomenal tool. And thank you for attending. I hope you got everything you needed. Please feel free to ask any questions. I will stay around for a while.